Hello, everyone. Today we have with us Moni Dujeji. She was born in Canada to an immigrant Lebanese family. She is an inspirational speaker, master of ceremonies, pilgrim, and award-winning author. She walked the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, from Rome to Jerusalem, and of course, the entire Camino de Santiago. She used her experience of pilgrimage to inspire others. Moni, thank you to be with us today and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Ivan. It's such a pleasure and a treat to be with you here today. I look forward to our conversation.
My first question for you is, which was the moment in your life that made you decide to stop everything you were doing and start walking?
That's an excellent question. I'll be honest and say I knew nothing about pilgrimage at all. I was at a moment in my life where everything that I had built had fallen apart. I had played by society's rules, and I had an education, and I was, I have a master's degree in business. I was working in the corporate world, doing well economically. I was married at the time, but then that fell apart. When he left, my entire world collapsed with it. And everything that I thought I was doing correctly, if you will, and everything that I thought was of value, all of a sudden came into question. And I didn't have any answers. But I had a lot of questions. And those questions led me from, say, like therapists and trying to understand things from a worldly perspective. And then eventually they led me into more spiritual territory, because I feel our hearts, there's a longing in us to understand the deeper meaning of who we are and why we are here. And that led me into whatever the spiritual books were of the time, Neil Donald Walsh, Deepak Chopra, all of that. Uh-huh. And I spent most of my free time actually in the library, in bookstores, kind of browsing. And I remember one day, I was at the bookstore, and I see on the bookshelf a book with the cover facing outwards. And all I see there is a woman walking. It's a woman with a walking stick, wearing a hat and a backpack. And it's a side profile of her walking. And nothing more than seeing that image, I felt every hair on my body stand up. And I immediately felt an identification with that image, even though I had no idea what it was. It's not like I was a huge hiker. I wasn't like a huge, out in the country. I lived in the city. I'm a city girl. I was fit. I ran marathons. I was generally fit, but something about that image of that woman with the walking stick and the backpack immediately spoke to me. And when I went to look at it, it was the book by Shirley MacLaine. It was My Camino, which back then, we're talking over, this was late 90s, 1998, 1999, around that time. There weren't a lot of books, obviously, about pilgrimage, but it called to me. It immediately called to me, and I picked it up, and it was a book that I inhaled. I read it quickly, and I just felt such an identification with this idea of going on a pilgrimage. And the Camino, that was the first time I had heard of the Camino, and it was the first time that I really felt this calling to go on this kind of a journey, to go using the act of walking, which something in that really connected, walking, to go on this journey of exploring what it means to be alive, what it means to be a human being in this vast universe in which we live. And so it was specifically a book. It was a book that introduced me to the Camino, and that introduced me to pilgrimage and the idea of walking. And it was walking on the Camino. And this was, my first Camino I did in 2001. And I walked it
100 years ago.
Camino de Santiago, because that's what she did. There was no information online about the Camino. There was nothing. The internet was just starting. There was nothing. And so the way but this is just me. I had quit. There came a moment when I felt I really wanted to explore more inwardly. I wanted to understand my life, how I had gotten there. I wanted to build a life that really had more meaning and more purpose than just simply, you know, working. Working is great. You know, making money is also really good. But I wanted to combine that with something that had value for me, that had meaning for me, that had purpose.
Yeah.
And so first I quit my job. And that was probably the hardest thing to do, because you're leaving behind all the economic security and everything that identifies you. You know, I was working for Microsoft at the time, and there was a certain kind of cachet. You know, I'm working for, you know, this company, and your identity, my identity was tied to that. And so leaving that was leaving everything behind and going into an unknown. And pilgrimage does that to you. It leads you into the unknown. I traveled by myself, in Egypt and Mediterranean Europe, and then I arrived in Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port because that's where Shirley MacLaine started. So I imagine that's where the Camino started. I was carrying too much. I had luggage. I had a backpack, because I was traveling as a tourist. I wasn't a pilgrim.
You carried a lot.
Exactly. And so in Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port, I started talking to some people. I bought the only guidebook that was there in English. There was one guidebook in English, and I still have it. And I just looked at it and I started reading. I said, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to kind of unpack my backpack and trying to figure out how to do this thing. But I still carried, it was a huge backpack, and I had at least 20 kilograms. It was heavy. I'm a 5 foot person. I'm not very big, but I didn't know. And my first day of walking was from Saint-Jean to Roncesvalles. And so that's like the hardest, like the hardest start with a 20 kilogram backpack. It was, my feet were destroyed, like everything. Even though I was fit, that was like other level.
How would you describe the Camino de Santiago as an experience?
Well, the Camino for me at the time really became the crucible, or the laboratory, if you will, the place where I could begin to examine who I was and to face my fears. What I loved about the Camino, kind of from a physical point of view, is that it was very well marked. The infrastructure was excellent to support the pilgrim. Obviously the culture, even though I didn't speak the language back then at all, the culture I found very welcoming to the foreigner, to the pilgrim.
20 years ago, because you are bilingual right now.
Now I'm bilingual, because now, I married a Spanish man, so a man from Spain. So, and we lived in Spain as well. So for me, it was important to understand the language, to understand the culture, to speak it. And so I found the Camino, very welcoming. Obviously the food is out of this world. The culture is magnificent. It's beyond compare. I understand why people want to keep going back and back again to experience that. It really is something very special, the Camino itself. But for me, it was because of where I was in the point that I was in my life. I needed that space. I needed that distance of walking to be able to face all the things that when you're busy, when you're working, when you have all of your lists, you just don't have time to deal with. And I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have like music in my ears. This was before all of that became like everywhere. So for me, it was just me and my walking stick and myself. And life. And when I started walking, I was asking life, the universe, creator, saying, I really want to heal from this past. I want to heal from this. I want to learn from it. And I want to be able to use what is of my life now in service to something that's just beyond myself and beyond just my own interests and needs and desires. I really want to be in service to something greater. And so I opened myself to that possibility, and I allowed the Camino, I allowed life to speak on that journey. And so for me, it was transformative. Of course, it changed my life because it sparked the next step. And I think that's maybe always the hardest thing for people to, like, we want to plan everything, we want to organize every single step. And I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. But in that, there needs to be space so that the unexpected and the magic which everybody talks about, the magic of the Camino.
Yeah.
The magic enters when you allow kind of the plans to just sit for a little bit. Keep them there. It's good. It's good to have plans, but let's allow things to enter, maybe that hadn't been entered, that hadn't been given the space to enter before. And I found that for me very, very important, very useful. And it opened the door for me to do this pilgrimage. It was on the Camino, actually, that I learned about a pilgrimage that goes from Rome to Jerusalem. But this pilgrimage is not like the Camino. There's no path. There are no yellow arrows. It's nothing like that at all. It's all road walking, and Alberto and I making up the path as we walked. But all of this inspiration and all of the confidence and all of to kind of look inwards, all of that happened on the Camino. It was where I learned this way of being, of walking in confidence and with the Camino, with life.
So in your opinion, what state of mind and soul do you think a person should have to start walking a journey?
This kind of a pilgrimage for me, I mean, think back to medieval times, and when pilgrims of old used to embark on these journeys. A pilgrimage was an act of faith. It was an act of faith. It was an act. That's why it's not just a hike. If you want to go for a hike, you can go to any natural park in any country and you're on a hike. So what is it that calls you to go across the ocean, for example, from the United States, from Canada, from anywhere, travel all of these distances, long distances, to go to a country whose language and culture you often don't speak, to go on this pilgrimage? Why are we going on that? And we're not going on just another nature hike, right? So I think the calling is to leave the ordinary world and to the world of the mind and the material mind and the physical mind, and to open our minds, to open our hearts to simply another way of being and another way of living and another way of experiencing and understanding the life that we lead. Because the voices of the world are many, and there will be many voices pulling you in many directions. But there is also within us, in that stillness, there is a voice. There is also a teacher, a guide, an inner guide. You know, there's the outer yellow arrows of the Camino, but there's the inner yellow arrows. And the inner yellow arrow is that inner voice that's very still, very calm, that inner teacher that says, let me show you another way. And so this ability to open up a little, and by the way, that voice speaks maybe in an intuition. You kind of get a hunch, you know, maybe I should check this out. Or like in my case, the book that came right to my face and said, here's another step for you, shows up in conversations that maybe you overhear, our song that touches you. Those are like the signs, the synchronicities. Those are the ways that spirit, that your soul is saying, listen to me, pay attention. We often dismiss all of that and say that's just coincidence, but there is a great loving intelligence that's all around us, that wants to speak with us, that wants to guide us, that wants to lead us to our ultimate happiness and joy and fulfillment. But we are not listening to that voice. And so the ability to open ourselves up, even before we go on pilgrimage, we can do that. We can, we can start to tune in, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through yoga, whether it's even just going for a walk in nature, to just leave. It's almost like, okay, I'm going to drop this heavy backpack of my obligations and my expectations. I'm going to just leave that. And I'm just going to walk free and just allow whatever feels good in a way, whatever feels like it's calling me to lead for a little while. And that's a state that can be practiced. I believe that. It's our innate nature is this. This is who we are. And that's something that we can indeed begin to practice, this openness of our hearts, our openness to other possibilities, opening our minds to examine, well, maybe there's another way that I can look at this, and not thinking that I have the way, this is the only way, and there's no other way. Well, you can walk, I mean, you can do that, sure, But
Yeah.
where is the growth going to come from? Where is the experience going to come from? Where is the opening going to come from? If you already think you have all the answers, you know who you are, you know everything that there is to know, and there's nothing more that I can learn.
Yeah.
Right? So it's that willingness. It's a willingness to say, maybe there's another way, and I'm open to exploring that other way.
And right now, with all your experience, each time you go for a new journey, do you set up goals from that journey?
For me, goals has and plans, you know what? My mind, my logical mind needs to have the plans. It needs to have kind of that, it needs to write down everything and make the list. Because I want to feel like I'm safe. Because that's ultimately why we make plans, right? We make all plans because we feel that gives us security. We feel that with all of these plans, we're going to be safe because we're going to be able to control and predict what's going to happen. And so we eliminate all risk. Mm-hmm. And I understand that because, you know, I'm a planner. I love planning. I love making lists. But what I've learned is that when you can make space for the unexpected to enter, then you are enriched in ways that you cannot ever plan for, that you cannot ever predict. COVID, this last year, this pandemic, has shown us what happens with all plans. You can have all the best plans in the world and think that you know best and you know what you're going to do, and then a pandemic hits.
Yes.
Or in the case of pilgrimage, for example, you know, you've planned your route, you've planned everything, and let's just say you miss a flight, or your flight is delayed and you miss your connection, or you know your backpack is lost, which has happened. You know, all of this stuff happens
All the time.
And so how are you going to respond? How are you going to respond before this? If this is going to like collapse you, then perhaps this is the opportunity to say, well, maybe there is something in my belief system and how I respond that I need to examine. Perhaps I'm not as flexible as I like to think that I am. I'm not as open as I'd like to think that I am. I'm not as, I hate the word resilient because it's so overused, but that's the word. I'm not as resilient. You know, I also don't trust myself. I don't trust that I'll be able to figure things out as I go along. I don't trust that people are going to help me. I don't trust that, you know, I can step by step do whatever I need to do, and that I'm supported in what I'm doing to make it work out. We don't believe we don't believe that. We don't trust that because we're not trained to. We're trained not to trust what our outer minds tell us, what the outer experts tell us, what everybody else tells us. But we're not accustomed to trusting this inner voice and this inner, the ability that we have to actually figure it out, because we're not alone in figuring it out. If we just allow ourselves to listen to that voice, it will guide us. And maybe your luggage did get lost because it did need to get lost because you were carrying too much anyways.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe this path that you think is the right path is maybe not the one that you need to walk. The
signals, right?
The signs, the synchronicities. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, it happens so that we may wake up. So some of us can wake up easily. Some of us need maybe a little bit of a stronger hit over the head.
More
of a push. It's all loving though. It's that soul, it's that spirit saying, it's time to wake up. It's time to put aside all the things of the world and let us move into the things that are of maybe of the spirit, the things of the soul, the things of love, the things of creator. And this is what the real journey is about. You know, we can walk to Santiago de Compostela, we can enter the magnificent cathedral and appreciate and love and be grateful for everything that was created. And at the same time, realize that the journey itself has awakened us and brought us to a deeper understanding and connection with the truth of who we are. That's the inner journey. This is really what is most sacred. You know, the tomb of the apostle is beautiful. The cathedral is magnificent. It's all a holy, sacred place. The most sacred place, however, is within. It's our hearts. It's our connection with the divine. That is what is eternal, right? And this is what being on this kind of a journey, on this kind of a pilgrimage, allows you to connect with. You are sacred. What is in you is sacred. This is truly what it is that I believe anyways, that we are walking towards, metaphorically, if we are open to allow that to enter and to guide us. Marvels await, really, beyond which whatever is in the world can never compete with. So, yeah.
Bonnie, to wrap up, what does walking for peace mean to you?
Walking for peace. Well, obviously you're referring to the journey that Alberto and I undertook, walking from Rome to Jerusalem.
Yes.
That journey took us 13 months. It was 13 months of walking. It was a long journey. It was 5,000 kilometers. And in the beginning, walking for peace for me meant I'm going to walk to Jerusalem, and peace means bringing peace between, Israelis and Palestinians, Arabs and Jews, Christians and Muslims, and bringing all, we're going to have a huge peace march when we arrive, and it's all going to be just demanding peace, and it's going to be great. And I'm going to go work for peace with some NGO when we arrive in Jerusalem. This was the grand plan. This was the plan that I had in my mind. But the more that I walked, and the more experiences that we had, obviously day after day with people,
yeah,
the more I began to realize that I was not a person at peace. I was someone who was carrying with her still a lot of anger, a lot of resentments, a lot of expectations, a lot of fears, a lot of very rigid ideas about what's right, what's wrong, and which way is correct and which way is not. And it hit me little by little. It wasn't like, it was little by little I started to realize, well, what kind of a peace am I going to be creating if I'm not at peace myself? Right? And so Alberto and I had always repeated the words, Gandhi, be the peace you want to see in the world. And that's easy to talk about until you then have to get to the part of being that peace. And to be, you have to be willing to look at all of your fears and all of the things that are covering up the peace and the light and the love that you essentially are. And so walking for peace, as much as it was an outer pilgrimage, became very much a personal journey of facing all of those fears and all of those very rigid ideas and thoughts and everything that was keeping peace from shining in the world. And so it started out as the big, I'm going to do something for peace. It was after 9/11. This pilgrimage will be for peace, and we're going to, people are going to join us as we walk, and we're going to have a huge peace march. And it just, I surrendered that idea, which was not easy because that was my plan, right? That was my goal.
Yeah.
When I could finally surrender that idea and realize, no, it's not about that first. First, it's about what state are you in? What kind of a peace do you think you're going to be working for if you're filled with all of these rigid ideas and just a lot of the anger and the fears and the emotions that you have not dealt with? And so peace for me has shifted from being something outer focused to something that is inner focused. The journey is that. And from that place of connecting and being at peace, I then do whatever is mine to do. I come from that place for what I do, because if I'm coming from this place, then I know whatever I'm doing is 100% aligned and kind of surrounding me for it to succeed. But if I'm coming from, I've got to protest and I've got to be angry and I've got to be judging and attacking and condemning, I can work for peace. Okay, I think I'm building peace, but it's just going to show up in a different form because I haven't done the work myself of truly healing what was causing me all of the anger in the first place.
Yes, if you agree that humans decide to live these kinds of experiences when there is something hurtful inside them.
Yeah, like I told you earlier, either we wake up gently or we need the hit on the head to say wake up. And oftentimes it's painful experiences that cause us to pause because otherwise we're not pausing. We're not pausing to reflect on what it is that has hurt us and why we are hurt and what has happened and how we can learn from it and how we can heal from it. And so hurtful experiences are a way, sadly. In my case, it was, you know, it was the, you know, the divorce at that time that was my hit on the head, because I wasn't listening. There was always the little things along the way that I should have paid attention to, but I didn't. And so eventually the, you know, the big board with the comes and hits you. So, so I would say it's not necessary, but oftentimes to get our attention, the hurtful experiences become the means that spirit says, it's time to wake up and it's time to do the work now of healing and transformation and really opening up to the brilliance that you are in this world. But you can't get to there until you do this work. And so I think that that happens. Yeah.
Moni, thank you so much for your time. We can remember us, where is the correct place or website to see all your job and your books and your extraordinary experiences and more?
Well, thank you so much for that. Our website is walkingforpeace.com, all one word. And obviously there you'll find out more about our journeys, especially to Jerusalem, our maps, our books, our offerings. We're delighted always to have conversations that enrich and that inspire. So thank you for the opportunity.
Of course, my pleasure, Moni. Thank you so much. I hope to see you very soon.
Likewise, and buen camino.
Buen camino. Bye.
Bye.